Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. Today is day 8 of Python for DevOps series, and in this video we will learn the basics of lists and tuples. Especially for today's video, I've got plenty of notes that will help you to revise the concepts that I've explained in this video. You can see that we have a file for each and every concept: list.md, tuple.md, list versus tuple.md, and frequently asked questions.md. If you go to any of these files, you will see detailed notes, the same thing that I'll be explaining in today's video. Not just that, once you feel that you have revised all the concepts, you can go to the assignment folder. There is questions.md and answers.md. In questions.md, you have questions to assess your knowledge on lists and tuples, the basics. And you also have answers, but I'll highly recommend you first try by yourself. And if you fail to get the answers, you can refer the answers.md. Now, why did I say basics of lists and tuples? That is because if you go to the course syllabus, you will see that I have divided lists and tuples into two parts, day 8 and day 10. So today you will learn about the basics of lists and tuples, and in day 10 you will learn the advanced concepts. Why is it like that? Because to learn the advanced, to learn the list iterations, or to learn how to write some advanced list operations, you need to have some knowledge on the loops. So that's why first I'll explain the basics of lists today. Then tomorrow you will learn about loops, and in day 10 we will cover the advanced concepts of lists. I hope you understood. Now that I've explained what we will learn today, I've explained what you will learn in the next two classes. Let's quickly move to the whiteboard and start understanding the concept of lists and tuple. Now, during day 2 of this course, I have explained, when I was talking about the data types, I told you that there is something called as sequence data types, right? And as part of sequence data types, sorry, not database data types, as part of sequence data types, I told you that you have lists and tuples. Of course, there are others, but right now, what we will learn today is lists and tuples. But your fundamental question has to be, that's fine, but why should I use lists and tuples? What is the reasoning behind it? So let me take a very simple example and try to explain you that. So let's say you have something called name. Okay, so you can simply say name is equals to Abhishek. So what did you do here? So you took a variable called name, and using the assignment operator, you assigned this string to the variable. And now this becomes a string variable, right? Or this is a variable of type string. Now, what if instead of storing one name, I want to store list of students' names? Okay. Instead of storing one student name called Abhishek, I want to store list of students' name. Now, if you don't use list, what you can traditionally do with the knowledge that you have till now, you can say name1 or student1 is equals to Abhishek, right? Then you can say name2 or student2 is equals to XYZ. Name3 is equals to this. Now, if you have 100 names, then you will define 100 variables. Name 100 is equals to geo. And to print this, now let's say you have to print all of these names. Again, you write a print statement, right? And in the print statement, you will print each and every name, right? So this is how you handle it. But this becomes very tedious process, right? What is tedious? Basically, this becomes a very lengthy process. And this is not even recommended because you are creating 100 variables here. Instead of that, what you can do is you can use a sequence data type here called list. Okay. So what you will do, instead of storing the names in that way, you can simply store list one or students list is equals to, inside the square brackets, you can start writing name of the student one, name of the student two, name of the student three, till name of the student 100. So you are declaring everything in one single variable. And if someone asks you to print all the students' names, you can simply say print of list. Okay. I'll come to the DevOps point of view, why we would use a list. But before that, let's try the same thing on the terminal so that you understand this concept in a little better way. Right? Till now, what I've explained, let's try to put it on a terminal. So let's switch to Day-8 folder, pwd day-08, right? Now let's close all of these files. And inside the Day-8 folder, let's create something called test.py. Okay. Now, let's say, right, let's use the same use case where you have three students. You will say S1, which represents, let's say, student one. S1 is equals to, basically, you have to write the variables as clear as possible. But just because I'm explaining you the concept, I said S1, but better you write it as student one. So S1 is equals to, let's say, Abhishek. And then you have another student called S2, which is something like, let's say, Ram. S3 is equals to John. S4 is equals to, let's say, Tim. So there are four students. You have created four variables. Now your task is, let's say, to print all of the students' names. So what you need to do? Again, you would say print S1, copy this. So this is how you would handle, right? S1, S2, S3, and S4. Now you will go to your terminal, say Python test.py, and you will see all the names printed. But to do this, what you have done is you have created four variables. I'll not go into memory and all of that point of view, but even for writing this program, this looks very tedious, right? So you have written this in 8 lines, and by looking at the program itself, you can say that, this is not required. You are writing it tedious. If it extends to 100 students, then you have to create 100 variables. So how to avoid this? For that reason, Python has something called as lists. Okay. And what you can do is you can define something called students names. Okay. And inside this, to design a list or to represent a list, what you need to do is you need to use a square bracket. This is very important. I'll come back to this. You should only use square bracket. And within the square bracket, you can start writing student one's name. Probably if it is Abhishek, student two's name, let's use the same example, Ramu. Student three's name, Tim. Student four's name, John. Now, what I can do simply is I can simply say print students names. See what would happen if I just say Python test.py. Everything is printed in the same line. Of course, the representation is slightly different. Here you print it as individual line, whereas here you print it in one single line. But you can do this in this format as well. Once you understand the concept of loops, I'll get back to this. But for now, what List has done, List has made our life very easy. Now, if you have 100 students, just keep adding 100 students name here. You don't have to modify any logic beyond that. You just need to only modify that. Now you might be wondering, but Abhishek, I don't understand what is the use case from DevOps engineering point of view. Can you give a very simple example why and how I would use a list? It's very simple. Let's say your task is, okay, so your task is to get list of S3 buckets in a particular AWS account and print all the S3 buckets. This can be similar to the things, right? You can provide list of S3 buckets, you can provide list of EC2 instances, EBS volumes, EKS clusters, anything. Now, if you imagine the thing similar to the students that I've explained, in an account, if there are 100 S3 buckets, okay, so to print all the 100 S3 buckets, if you start creating one variable for one S3 bucket, so you will say bucket one is equals to some name, right? Bucket 2 is equals to some name. You have to create 100 such variables till bucket 100, right? And then again, you have to use print statements for each bucket. Or you can use one print statement, and inside the one print statement, probably you can use comma, or you can use any particular delimiter and you can print it. Okay, from the print statement point of view, I agree that you can only create one print statement, but I've explained you the problem, right? This becomes very tedious process for declaring so many variables and storing individually. And the other thing is, it is good to store them in a list because everything is in one place. So what you can do, going back to the program, let's close this MD file as well. So going back to the program, what you can do here, you can create something called S3 underscore buckets underscore list. And let's say you have S3 bucket, something like Abhishek demo bucket. Right? So you will print all the list of S3 buckets in the account. Now you might be wondering, Abhishek, how will I get this information? What are the S3 buckets? Please wait. We will get to that point. We have a dedicated video for Boto3 module and the functions and modules that DevOps engineers would use. We have so many classes for that. After this, like once we learn about sequence data types, once we learn about the loops and all the classes are dedicated to performing real-time use cases using Python. So for now, let's not focus there because we need to make our fundamentals strong first. If I start explaining those real-life use cases, you will find it difficult without these basics. You will not understand why am I using list, why am I using a dictionary, or why am I using set in a particular point of time, right? So you understood why we use list, right? Now, these are some use cases, like it can be for EC2 instances, it can be for S3 buckets, whatnot. Thing is, Abhishek, you said there is one more concept called tuple. So how tuple is different from list, or what exactly tuple is? The only difference between list and tuples, okay, that you need to understand. Okay, of course, there are some differences from memory point of view, some differences from quick access point of view, but we will not go there at this point of time. For now, you need to understand that lists are mutable, whereas tuples are immutable. What does that mean? Okay, so this is a very common interview question where people say, what is the difference between lists and tuples? Or people ask, is list mutable or immutable? I'll explain you that. So tuples are immutable. That means they are very similar to lists, but the only difference is once you create a tuple, okay? Once a tuple is created, it cannot be resized. For easy understanding, I'm using this word. What does that mean? Let's say if you create a tuple with 3 students' names, I'll say Abhishek, Ramu, Tim. Now, if you are creating this as a list, this can be increased or decreased. I can add 2 more students, I can add 10 more students, or I can add 100 more students. I can also remove some students, right? If I'm creating a list, and that is your common use case. Because number of students in a class can be added, removed, number of S3 buckets can be added, removed. So it would be ideal to use a list. But there is another use case where what if, for some reasons, you want to create a list that cannot be resized. That is, you cannot remove elements or you cannot add elements. In such cases, you cannot use list, but you will use something called tuple. So for easy understanding, you can assume that tuple is a list which cannot be resized. Where resize means you cannot add or remove elements once it is created. So in practice, we call this kind of things as immutable, something that cannot be changed. Whereas list is mutable, something that can be changed. Okay, so there are use cases. I'll explain you. You might be wondering, but Abhishek, why should I use a tuple? Okay, so if I'm using a list, I can simply increase or decrease elements, right? So today I add 3 students, whereas tomorrow I can add 4th and 5th student. Or today I have added 10 S3 buckets. Tomorrow in my organization, if there are 15 S3 buckets or 100 S3 buckets, I can simply add or remove. What is the use of tuple? Okay, let's say you are writing a Python program. Okay, and in the Python program, you are dealing with some information. Let's say you are storing list of admins. Okay, list of AWS account admins. So if you use a list for this, okay, you will say admins list is equals to Abhishek. There are only 2 admins, let's say Abhishek and John. And what happened is you don't want to add any more admins on this particular AWS account. That means you already know that there will be only 2 admins for the next 1 year, for the next 10 years, anything, because you don't want to give any other people access to the AWS account. So in this case, the size of this admins, it cannot be increased, it cannot be decreased. What happens is, let's say unexpectedly in your program, there is a developer, or in your program, there is someone who modified the admins. So, unexpectedly in the program, what has happened is admins got added or removed. Then what has happened? This information, which is very critical for you, got changed. This is not the only thing. When you are creating a list, there is a difference between lists and tuples from the memory point of view as well, right? Because list is immutable, sorry, list is mutable, it can be changed. So the memory allocation for lists and the memory allocation for tuples will be different. Tuples have better memory footprint, right? So for these 2 reasons, one is you already know there are only 2 admins. There will not be admins added or removed. And in program, unfortunately, if the admins got increased or decreased or added or removed, then there is a problem. This can be avoided if you use tuple. The other thing is tuples, because they are mutable in nature. So the memory allocation for tuples is far better than the memory allocation or memory usage of lists. So these are the 2 reasons that you have to explain, right? Reason one is when you know something that should not be changed, if you are declaring it as a list, the problem would be knowingly or unknowingly, if you are modifying that particular thing, then you will run into a problem. Because you already know, go with a tuple. Tuple cannot be changed. So what happens if you are creating admins using a tuple, then even if someone wants to modify in the program, they will not be able to do that. Second thing is tuple has better memory footprint. That is, tuples are better from the memory point of view, right? Because what happens with the list is there is a dynamic memory allocation. Because it is immutable in nature, Python says that, okay, there can be something added or removed. So the memory allocation is quite different for it. Whereas with tuples, Python already knows, okay, I only have to allocate this much of memory to it. So this is the primary difference between lists and tuples. And there is a difference from the syntax point of view. When you are writing a list, right, what you will do is you will use a square bracket. Whereas if you are writing a tuple, you will use the normal braces, right? So what if I simply convert, okay, if I simply change this from the square brackets to the normal brackets, this will automatically get changed from list to tuple. You can verify that. You can simply say print type of S3 bucket list. Okay. So if you just change this, so type is a keyword in Python. This will let you know what is the type of the variable. So now what did we do? We declared a variable, and using this braces, we have added list of elements. Now let's see, using the print statement, what would be the type of this variable. Python test.py. What did it say? Class tuple. Now if you just change this to the brackets, okay, what will happen is class is changed to list. So that means just the braces defines, or only through the braces Python will understand if this is a tuple or list. Now Abhishek, you have explained that if you are using list, you said that it is mutable. That means you can add or remove elements. And you said if it is a tuple, it is immutable. You cannot add or remove elements. But how do I add or remove elements? You did not explain that. Let's go to that. So once you create a list, if you want to add one more S3 bucket to the list, what you need to do is you need to say the variable dot, we will use an inbuilt function called append. Okay. So let's remove this line for now. So I'll say S3 bucket list dot append, and inside the braces, I can add one more element. Let's say new S3 bucket. Now let's use a print statement and see if this new element got added to the S3 bucket list variable or not. See, you will see a new element called new S3 bucket. Now, if this is a tuple, or if this was a tuple, let's see what would have happened. Firstly, I will convert this to this particular brackets. And now I'll say S3 bucket list dot append, and I'm trying to add something. See what has happened? It said tuple object has no attribute called append. That means you cannot add any new element to tuple because of the behavior of it, right? So your program execution will fail even if someone tries to use the append function, right? Knowingly or unknowingly in the program. Let's say this was the program that you have initially written, and this program is of 1 million lines. I'm just giving an example. And somewhere, some person unknowingly has added this particular line. If it was a list, and if this was list of administrative users names, what would have happened? A new user called S3 bucket would get appended to the list, and this particular user will also get the administrative access. So to avoid that, when you know that you are dealing with such information which should not be modified, then use a tuple. Now Abhishek, you explained about adding a new element. Okay. But how do I remove an element from a list? Again, it's very simple. Let's say if this is the S3 buckets list, and if I want to remove this particular element, so I can simply say variable, that is S3 bucket list dot remove, and then add this particular thing. So now you should see the output as Abhishek bucket, Ramu bucket, and Tim bucket. Let's see if that happens. I need to change this to a list, right? So again, why you see an error message there? Because you cannot perform remove operation on tuple. So let's try to print it. Abhishek bucket, Ramu bucket, and Tim bucket. Awesome. So you understood what exactly is a list, what exactly is a tuple, when to use a list, when to use a tuple, and finally how to add and remove or append or remove elements from a list. Can you append and remove elements from tuple? No, it's not possible. So during your interview, till now, what we have learned, the questions can be, right? I'll list down the questions one more time so that you are very clear about it. So the first question here can be, what is the difference between list and tuple? And this can also be asked in a different way, where people can ask you, is list mutable or immutable? Okay. Or is tuple mutable or immutable? In any of the cases, the question is same, and you have to explain clearly that list is mutable. That is, once list is created, you can add or remove elements. Coming to tuple, tuple is immutable. That means once tuple is created, you cannot add or remove elements. Now here interviewer might ask you, tell me a scenario where you have used list and tell me a scenario where you have used tuple. From list point of view, I've explained, you can say list of S3 buckets, list of EC2 instances, anything like that. Now, from the tuple point of view, tell that, we have a program where we want to store list of admin users or list of users which has administrative privileges, right? And because this list has to be restricted in number, and we know that admins will not be added or removed. These are the fixed number of admins or admin users. So in such case, we will use a tuple, right? Even in a program, if someone expectedly or unexpectedly tries to modify this, if you use a tuple, this will not be modified, right? So this is something that we have learned, and we have also learned about append and remove functionality. How to append and how to remove elements from list, definitely not possible on tuple. Now the next question here is, you should ask me something. Abhishek, okay, I have you know create a list of S3 buckets. Now my goal is only to print one of these S3 buckets. I don't want to print all of all of this S3 buckets, but I only want to print one of this. So what happens is, when you create a list, so how Python handles this list is, Python allocates memory and Python creates index for each and every object. That means if you simply say S3 bucket list of 0, and if you use it inside a print statement, see what would happen is, Python will print the first object in the list or the first element in the list. We should call it as element, not object. So if I just do print test.py, now you will see Abhishek underscore demo underscore bucket. So what has happened? So this has become your list of O. So I'll say list of O, and this will become your list of 1. So, brackets are also called as off when you try to refer it. So you'll say, instead of S3 bucket list bracket 0, you'll say S3 bucket list of 0. Okay. So S3 bucket list of 0, S3 bucket list of 2, let's say, what would be the output? 0, 1, and 2. So here you will see a slight difference. You might be thinking, so because this is 1, it should be printed as 1, but the index usually starts with 0. So this is 0, this is 1, and this is 2. So if you change this to 2, then you should see Tim demo bucket. Perfect. So the length of this particular S3 bucket list is 1, 2, 3, 4, but objects with index starts from 0. Now, how do I verify what is the length of this S3 buckets list? Okay, you might be saying that, Abhishek, initially I created this with 4 objects. Okay, but I want to verify if the length is 4 or not. So for that, again, you have something called print of length of S3 buckets list. Let me remove this. And if I try to print, you will see length is 4, because you have 4 elements inside the list. Now let me change and add one element and see what will be the length of it. Okay. So here I'll say S3 buckets list dot append of new underscore S3 underscore, sorry, bucket. Okay. Let's do a print statement here and let's do a print statement here. Now here the output should be 4 and here the output should be 3 because I have removed, sorry, here the output should be 5 because I have added an element. Let's see if that is the case or not. Perfect. So here output is 4 and here output is 5. Now if I remove two elements, okay. So I'll say S3 bucket list of remove. So let's remove Abhishek demo bucket and let's copy paste and let's remove Ramu demo bucket. Okay. And now if I have to print the length of the S3 buckets, now what should be the desired output? Here the length of elements is 4 or the length of list is 4. Here the length of list is 5. Now I have removed two objects. So here the length of list should be 3. Let's see if it is true or not. Perfect. So if you remove everything, then the length of the list would be 0, right? That means if you just remove all the elements like Abhishek, Ramu, Tim, John, then you will see the list would be of length 0. How do you verify the length? Using the, using this function called len. So using this, you will verify the length of the S3 bucket. Perfect. So this is another function that you have learned. Till now, we learned about 3 functions or, 3 manipulations on the list. One is append, one is remove, and then we learned about length as well. Now, let's slightly change it. And what I'll try to do here is, let's try to do this for a tuple. Okay. Will the length function work as is for a tuple or not? Let's try to see. Now this is changed to a tuple, right? And if we use the length, will it work? Perfect. So for the tuple as well, the function is length itself. So that means there are some common similarities between lists and tuples, and there are differences as well. So if you go to Day-8 folder, I have explained this thing. When it comes to notes folder, if you go to list, so this is exact thing that I've explained: how to define a list, how to access a particular element in the list, how to find length of the list. Then in the manipulations, I have explained about append, I've explained about remove, and the next thing that we will learn is slicing of a list. Now this is very simple. What I will try to do is, I just want to, let's go back here. So this is the entire list, right? Now what I'll do is I will perform an operation where I will say print S3 bucket list slicing of 1:3. Now don't get confused. What exactly I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take this list, and from this list, let me say 0, 2. So from this list, I am just trying to create another list. Okay. So what I am doing is, if you use Python test.py, you will see that from object 0, I mean, you can call it as object 0 and object 1. That is Abhishek demo bucket and Ramu demo bucket. I have taken from this particular list and I have created a new list. So if you try to you can say new underscore list here. Okay. And what has happened here? A new list got created. There is a new variable, and this is also a list variable. And inside this, you have created Abhishek demo bucket and Ramu demo bucket. That is because you said elements 0, 1. You will not use element 2 because this is the upper bound. Only 0 and 1 is considered. If I change this to 3, what will happen? Sorry, I did not use a print statement, right? So if I just change this to new underscore list, So here what will happen is you will see Abhishek bucket, Ramu bucket and Tim bucket. So the thing to understand here is even though I mentioned 0 and 3, the upper bound is not considered. That is only 0, 1 and 2 is printed on the terminal, right? So you need to understand this. Just do with the practice. I mean, if you practice it couple of times, you will understand the slicing mechanism. You will get confused, by seeing 0 to 3, you will assume that 0, 1, 2 and 3 will get printed on the terminal, but the upper bound is not printed. A new list will be created, okay, with 0, 1 and 2. That's it. And after that, there is another function. Let's say that you have something like numbers is equals to 1 comma 10 comma 15. Okay, and what you want to do is you want to sort these numbers. Okay, that means you want to get this in the proper order. Right now it's in the proper order. Let's say 10, 20 and 15. So at this point of time it's not in order. So what I can do, so I can simply say numbers dot sort. And what will be the output if you just say again print of numbers? You will see that the numbers are in sorted order, 1, 15 and 10. So if you want to perform the sort mechanism, you can use this particular thing. And you can play with lists. So if we go back to the same examples, right? Because we have already learned about the string manipulation functions. Let's say you want to concatenate this element and this element. Okay, both of them are strings, right? So you want to concatenate this and this. What you can simply do is you can simply say print S3 bucket list of 0 plus S3 bucket list of 1. Now let's try to see what is the output. See, both the buckets got appended. Of course, you can add few more things. Probably you can say plus within this particular thing, let's add 2 hyphens and then let's say plus. So here you would clearly see that 2 things got added. So Abhishek demo bucket and Ramu demo bucket. So concatenation and all of these operations you can perform, because what has happened is individually I'm trying to access an element, and because both of them are strings, I have concatenated them. Now, one final thing that I wanted to explain is if you want to perform a list heterogeneous one, that means you can store lists with combination of strings and numbers as well, or strings and different data types. So here I can create a new list. Till the time I have explained lists with S3 buckets or lists with numbers, but lists can also be created with different data types. So for example, I can say random underscore list, and inside this I can just store numbers like this, and I can also store some strings, random, or let's say Ramu, Abhi, and I can also store, let's say, a float 7.5. For list, it doesn't matter. When you try to print the list, it will give you output, because for list, each and everything inside it is just an element. Okay. So when you try to execute this, you will see that list doesn't matter what kind of elements that you are storing inside it. For list, whether it's a string, float, or integer, everything is just an element, and you can access anything using the same syntax. If you say of 4, and if you try to print it, because this is a string element, list has returned a string element, and if you just change it to a number, list would return a integer element. That's it. So lists are heterogeneous in nature. So this is another interview question. That means in lists, you don't have to store elements of similar data types, but you can store elements of different data types as well, right? So this is the class for today. Try to execute the things that I've explained, and also try to go through the assignment. use the notes to quickly revise what I have explained, and only after that go through the assignment. Tomorrow's class, I'll explain about the loops, and after that, we will move to the advanced portion of lists. So I hope you found today's video useful. Thank you so much for watching. See you all in the next video.